Well, it's taken me a while to get to this one. This is a Patreon request of mine, and I've been dragging my feet for reviewing this one, and I know I really shouldn't have. This was one that was donated by GRV Rush 2112, a very long time viewer and subscriber, and giving me a lot of support, not only just financially, but also just with their own comments. So really a big shout out and thank you to GRV Rush 2112. Thank you. And as a thank you, mainly to your donation through my Patreon, I'm giving you this review of this album. And it's a long time coming. And as I mentioned, I've been dragging my feet, but there's a lot and also not a lot to talk about with this particular album. So yeah, let's get into it. Odyssey to the West by Slice the Cake. So, Slice the Cake is a technical death metal, progressive rock, or progressive metal band. They're a conglomeration of an international musicians, so there's quite a number of them, spanning from England, Sweden, and Australia. They're very technical, very hard-hitting, but they also kind of fall into that trap of being just another voice in the already massive subgenre that is technical death metal and technical progressive metal. Odyssey to the West is their third studio release. They have The Man with No Face and Other Slices as both being released in 2012, and both are fine. The Man with No Face is the full-on concept album, and the Other Slice is more of the leftover pieces. It's almost a small EP, or I guess rather a large EP, because it's enough to be a full-length album. This album was their big concept album of Odyssey to the West, and it was actually followed up with a EP called Odyssey to the Gallows, which kind of finishes the story where it left off. And really, this album's kind of broken up into four and a half pieces that are then subdivided into other parts as well. So it starts off with The Exile, part 1 and 2, Stone and Silver, parts 1 through 3, Westward Bound, parts 1 and 2, and then Ash and Rust, parts 1 through 4. And throughout all of this, kind of smack dab in the middle, you do have Castle in the Sky, which is, I guess, a leftover from a previous album. And then a couple singles like Unending Waltz, and then the album ends with Destiny's Fool, and The Holy Mountain. The one thing that I do enjoy from this is the narrative style and how it's broken up between not only just the singing and the screaming and the growling, but there's actual spoken narrative going throughout this. And that's something that really perked my ears with Gareth Mason, who then continued on to Novena, which released a new album earlier this year. And this style of presentation within their vocals really perked my ears. Like, I really enjoyed that. And unlike other albums that have narrative throughout their albums, this one's kind of done in a very interesting way. It's never distracting. It's never overbearing, because they don't use it a lot. They just use it very sparingly and only when it's needed. And I felt like that was very well done, and I really enjoyed that. I also really do enjoy the music that's on this when it really hits hard. Like the orchestration and the compositions that are brought forth from Jack Mangaro, and I think Magaro, as well as Jake Lowe. All these individuals are really, really well put together, and same with Jonas Jennison, providing more of the guitars, the bass, a little bit more of the vocals, but like, what's really interesting about this is that there's less emphasis on the soaring guitar works or these grand technical skills within, like, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this without being demeaning to Slice the Cake, because they're much more on creating a symphony of sound rather than a clear-cut song with traditional instruments. There's a lot more emphasis on the synthesized soundscapes that are these huge, grandiose epics. And I know that sounds really interesting, but it does falter a little bit when those conventional musical stylings are kind of left to the wayside a little bit, because no real track really floats to the top as being a big track for me. And in fact, it's really interesting because I actually enjoy Odyssey to the Gallows, the EP that finalizes this, more than this particular album, mainly because like this particular album in one sense is very experimental and very like pushing the envelope on what music can do, but on the other hand, what they're doing is very generic tech progressive metal. And I don't feel like this is any real different than anything else that I could hear. Whereas that Odyssey to the Gallows is just this half hour of a mind screw that just like takes your brain out of your skull, gives it a blending, and then puts it right back in. And you're left with like, what did I just listen to for the past half hour? And yeah, it does kind of waver in terms of enjoyment for me in that sense, because like when I put this on, I'm like, okay, this is good, kind of generic, but not really, because there's enough personality on here to make it be something more. But I just never really felt all that engaged with this as well. Like there's no real moment on this album that I'm like, damn, that was good. That's it. That's what I'm looking for with this tech metal. And that's really all I have to say about Slice the Cake's Odyssey to the West. It's still a really good album, and I would recommend checking it out. This would probably be one that I would either go for a stream or a download, somewhere between the two. And I think just because of the uniqueness of this album, I'd probably give it a download. I would still recommend checking it out, and it's still a really interesting album as like a musical presentation. And I'm also shocked at the fact that on the Progressive Rock website, none of the albums that they've put out have been rated or reviewed. The only one that has is Odyssey to the West, and they've only had one rating. So considering how much of an influence this album would have had, I'm shocked to see that there's not more recognition about this. I mean, it is coming out a little bit later on in the game. Like if this had come out in like 2011, it would have been huge. But because it was coming out in 2016, I feel like they might have missed the boat just a hair in terms of being on the leading edge, as opposed to just continuing the wave of this style of tech metal, progressive metal music. But yeah, that's about it. What did you guys think of Odyssey to the West by Slice the Cake? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting down below. Again, a huge thank you to GRV Rush 2112 for donating to my Patreon. I apologize that it took me so long to get this album review out. It's just, I have a lot to say about this album, but I don't have a lot to say about the music that's found on this album, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of where I was bashing my head to try to figure out how I was going to present this review. But there you go. If you want to be cool like GRV Rush 2112, you can donate to my Patreon. It's down below. I've changed the donation rates to make it a little bit more feasible for me to get these styles of reviews out. So yeah, go check that out. See if there's anything that tickles your fancy if you want to support me. Even $1 a month is really, it goes a very long way. So I want to thank everybody who's already donated and anybody who wants to donate. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.